amazing Australians and the story of their lives. You're tuned to Lots to Chat About with Rosemary Peterswald.
Hello and welcome, listeners. My guest today is Professor Peter Nestor from the Queensland Brain Institute. Professor Nestor also has a co-joint appointment as a cognitive neurologist at Mater Hospital. As we all know, dementia is one of the biggest growing health problems in present times. And although we know age is a strong cause of this disease, it does seem to be hitting younger people too. So I thought we would pick Professor Nestor's brains, literally, to see what we can do to deter this disease and what are its possible causes. Welcome, Professor Nestor.
How do you do?
Thank you very much for being our guest today. Now, just before we get into the ins and outs of dementia and Alzheimer's, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in this field of work.
Well, I studied medicine initially, and then I became a specialist neurologist. I'm originally from Melbourne. That's where I did that bit. And then worked overseas for 20 years. I became what's called a clinician scientist, doing a researcher as well. I did my PhD over at the University of Cambridge in the UK and worked there for 15 years. And then, I spent time at a place called the German Centre for Neurodegenerative Disease, and then was recruited here in about 2017 back to Australia to this current appointment. So I'm a neurologist, which is obviously a specialist for brain diseases, and my specialty area is neurodegenerative diseases that give rise to dementia.
Right.
And I do research on this subject in people with these conditions.
Oh, terrific. So you are with the Queensland Brain Institute. Now, it's a world-renowned place, so please tell us a little bit more about it.
Oh, well, the Queensland Brain Institute was founded a bit over 20 years ago, I believe. Before I wasn't one of the foundation members, and it was set up as a research institute for understanding the nervous system and diseases thereof. Most of the work done at the Queensland Brain Institute is in the realm of fundamental science, so looking at basic mechanisms of how nerves talk to each other through synapses, or how nerves transmit information along axons and so on. And then in addition to that, there are research teams working on disease, and in particular neurodegenerative disease. So within the Queensland Brain Institute, there's an organisation called the Clem Jones Aging and Dementia Centre.
Oh, yes, yeah.
You no doubt know Clem Jones.
Yes, we certainly do. We had a representative from the Clem Jones organisation on our radio show not long ago.
Very good. Probably known to us then. So, so as I say, a lot of that work is basic science, and then I'm a bit of an anomaly at the Queensland Brain Institute because my research involves people with the actual diseases, and so we see people over at the Mater Hospital in the clinic, and then if they're willing and it's appropriate, we invite them over to the Queensland Brain Institute to participate in our research.
Oh, okay. So I was going to ask you to tell us a little bit more about the Memory and Cognitive Disorders Clinic at the Mater, which, of course, you are, you've got a co-joined appointment there as well. So tell us a little bit about that.
So we set that up when I arrived. We set that up as a cognitive neurology clinic. So it's a tertiary referral centre. We take referrals from other specialists only, and there's quite a bias towards, for instance, suspected young onset dementia, and also the more difficult to diagnose kind of presentations tend to gravitate to the clinic as well.
Right.
But we see all of the different diseases that can be associated with dementia there.
Yes, because it's right. There are quite a few. I must admit that one of the reasons, Peter, is that I am particularly interested in it is that a very close family relative of mine has sadly been suffering from dementia since she was in her early 60s. Now, sadly, it's progressed to such a stage that she's had to be admitted into a nursing home, and her husband coped as many carers do for many, many years, but then it just became too much for him, and it was unsafe for her. So, as I said in my introduction, it does seem, I don't know, do we hear more about it, or is it just that we're all growing older? But there does seem to be a lot more. It's more prevalent these days, isn't it?
Well, certainly we have an ageing population, and so the greatest risk factor for developing a dementia is age.
Yes.
So by virtue of having more people over 70 and more people over 80, then there will be more dementia. But it's not really increasing in per capita terms once you adjust for that, the fact that the population is ageing. Then no, it isn't really increasing proportionately. I think there's also been some sort of sociological factors that have changed over the years that, 50 years ago, if someone developed a young onset dementia, say in their 50s or something like that, they might have wound up in a long-term psychiatric hospital without any particular diagnosis.
All right. Yes.
So I think that those kind of factors, that it's more likely to be diagnosed now, or as opposed to someone just lost their mind or some kind of lay terminology like that.
It's difficult, isn't it? Look, I as a layperson, you read so many things about what you should do and what you shouldn't do. But my mother actually lived to be 98, and her brain was probably actually better than mine when she died, when she's 98 now. If you read all the things that we are supposed to do or not do, she was the total opposite. She actually smoked until she was in her late 70s. She liked the odd drink, well, more than the odd drink. She had quite a few sherries. And I must admit she wasn't great at exercise. So how did she miss out? My dad was, sort of much the same. He died at 90, and my father-in-law lived with us. He smoked and drank, and his brain was brilliant when he died at 93. But there probably exceptions, because ultimately, as I say, the reading tells us that there is so much we can do to prevent it. Is that right?
Well, yeah, you've hit on a very important point with those anecdotes, actually, because a lot of this has to actually do with luck and
Yes.
genetics. And
Right.
genetics as
Yes.
well. And yes, because you're quite right. You read in the press, it seems like we can prevent dementia by going for a walk each day and eating our greens and things
Yes.
like that. And that it concerns me actually that this has become such a prevalent view, because whilst it's good to have hope and give people things they can do, it tends to imply that if someone aged 55 develops a dementia, they somehow brought it on themselves by not doing the right things. And
Right.
and yet if you were to sit in my clinic, you would see that all these young people that we're diagnosed, the general pattern is they're generally very fit people who've had nothing wrong with them before. So whilst it's certainly true to some degree that modifying vascular risk factors, all those things like cholesterol and blood pressure and smoking and exercise and so on, at a population level will alter the statistics a little bit.
Right.
It doesn't really apply very well to individuals, and the story you've just told of people living into their 90s with the kind of lifestyles that don't get are not condoned in the media.
No.
Can do absolutely fine, and I think that's a really important point, because one of the things that I often feel with this is that it's sort of blaming suggesting that these things can be prevented when they can't is kind of suggesting that people did something wrong to bring this on themselves, and that's not fair.
So genetics plays quite a bit in it, do you think?
To some extent, yes. In complex ways. I mean, so there are for Alzheimer's disease, which is the commonest disease that causes dementia, there are genetic risk factors that make you more likely to develop Alzheimer's disease. There are also very, very rare forms of Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia that are inherited as a genetic abnormality, where if you inherit the gene from the parent who had it, you'll get it too. But
Right.
that's rare. Beyond that, there are genetic sort of risks for to change the odds of you getting Alzheimer's, or perhaps bring it forward a little bit. And obviously one can't do much about their genetic makeup. But this becomes very, very complicated very quickly, because genetics also confer all sorts of other things, like how long we live. And given that how long you live is the biggest risk factor, if you've inherited a terrible set of genes that means that everyone in your family dies of heart disease at age 60, well, then there's probably not going to be much dementia in the family, because people didn't live long enough to know about it.
Absolutely, yes.
So, I sometimes have seen people who tell me that they're petrified of dementia because everybody in their family had it.
Yes.
And you start going through the family and they're all in their 90s, and you think, well, actually what your genetics is longevity rather than risk of dementia.
All right. What is something that's always interested me, what is the difference basically between Alzheimer's and dementia?
Alzheimer's is a cause of dementia.
Oh, right.
So dementia is a word that just means you're losing mental abilities that you had formerly.
Okay.
That can be due to a multitude of reasons. And there's a whole bunch of diseases that cause progressive degeneration of the brain that give rise to that phenomenon of losing your mental abilities. And so the commonest of those is Alzheimer's disease, but there are many others. For instance, something called Lewy body disease, which is like Parkinson's disease. That's the second commonest cause of dementia in older age.
Yes.
There's one that we see a lot of called frontotemporal dementia that affects sort of more midlife, particularly people in their 50s and early 60s. But there's, the list of diseases that can cause you to lose mental abilities is very long indeed. Because Alzheimer's is known about and it's the commonest, people tend to use the terms interchangeably.
Right.
But it's not correct.
Okay.
It's analogous to sort of breathlessness versus asthma, if you like.
Right.
Breathlessness just means you're puffing, but what's the cause of your puffing? And it might be because you've got asthma or heart disease or whatever.
Right. Well, you see, now recently we had Wally Lewis, our great rugby legend Wally Lewis, on our show, and he has recently been diagnosed with, I think, CTEs, which was due, he feels, and I think probably many feel that it was due to so many concussions that he got on the rugby field or the rugby league field. So that's a sort of different sort of brain damage, is it?
That's tricky because there isn't really any way of diagnosing that condition in life at this time. But yes, you can get brain trauma can be associated with brain pathology, and which is different from Alzheimer's disease. And it's that one. There's a lot more to learn about that one. Finding some pathology in the brain and whether it's actually causing trouble or not is a little bit tricky to work out.
Now, you're listening to Lots to Chat About. I'm Rosemary Peterswald, and my guest today is Professor Peter Nestor from the Queensland Brain Institute. We hear about Chris Hemsworth. Now, he has done some sort of test, which is in all the papers, and very sadly, his father does, in actual fact, have dementia. And he has discovered that he holds some gene that might mean that he will get dementia later in life. Now, what do you think about that? I mean, is it worth being tested and seeing whether you're likely to get dementia, or is it something that really, personally, I think I'd rather not know?
Yeah, fair enough. I don't know what gene he's been tested for. I'm suspecting it might be ApoE. Yeah, so look, there's two scenarios here. One is there are, as I said before, there are rare genetic forms of Alzheimer's and of other dementias as well. But in Alzheimer's disease, you do see these genetic forms where if you inherit a faulty gene from a parent, you will also get Alzheimer's disease.
Right.
Typically affects people with onset in their 40s or 50s, sometimes even the 30s. So it's and this is a very unusual condition. Now, in that situation, and this is in genetics is called autosomal dominant inheritance, which we all have two copies of each gene. We inherit one from each parent, and so and then when we have children, each parent passes on one gene, so that the child ends up with two, one from each parent. So if in these dominant conditions, if you have one faulty gene, you will get the disease. And so if that means there's a 50-50 chance of passing that on to a child. And so that's something you can test for. And the take-up of that, you say you would rather not know, and you are in 50% of the population would agree with you. So people can go and get if one of these genes is known to be in one of their parents or one of their siblings, they can go to a genetic counselling service and discuss the pros and cons of being tested. And generally speaking, it's a personal choice whether one does that or not. And 50% of people on average choose that they would like to know, and 50% prefer not to know.
Right.
So now that is a rare scenario which comes up in sort of specialist clinics like mine. It's not that common out in the community. I suspect, though, that that's not what this case is with the gentleman you're talking about.
That's the actor Chris Hemsworth. Yes.
Right. I'm sorry, I'm not too good on actors.
He's he's our one of our. What is he in, Paul?
No idea.
What is it?
I have no idea.
He's one of our best-known actors. But he has been... It's very... I'm not saying anything out of order because it's been in all the papers, and he's very outspoken about it because, sadly, his father has got Alzheimer's or dementia. So, and he's done a recent television program where he's travelled around Australia to visit all the places that he lived as a child, and brought many wonderful memories back to his father, which supposedly does help, coping with what he has.
How old's his father, do you know?
I think his father is in his 60s. Reasonably young. It was a great... I haven't actually watched it just yet, but I intend to on the television, the show going around, as I say, looking at familiar places for him and his father to enjoy together. But now... how do scans like MRI or, how do they monitor dementia? Because I think you talk about that in some of the papers that you've written.
Yeah, actually, can we just finish the genetics bit? Because so there are these other things which are risk factor genes, which are not causal. And that's what I wonder if maybe that's the case with him. I mean, obviously, I don't know. I don't know the details of that individual. But and that's something we don't recommend getting tested for because it's only a risk factor.
Yes.
So it means that, if you've got a particular genetic profile, you are more likely to develop Alzheimer's by a certain age than someone who doesn't have that. But it's not an absolute. It doesn't mean that if you don't have that genetic profile, you can't have Alzheimer's, or if you have that genetic profile, that you will get Alzheimer's. So in clinical medicine, it's generally not recommended to be tested for that because it's not really giving you any definitive information, if you like.
Right. Right.
Okay. Now, on to scans. Yes. So there are all sorts of different scans. The standard one that someone will get if they start complaining that their memory's causing them trouble or whatever will be some sort of structural scan, the most common being an MRI scan. And that's partly done to rule out other things, to make sure one doesn't have a brain tumour or something like that.
Right.
But the brain shrinks in most of these diseases, but the problem is the brain shrinks as we get older anyway. And so that difference at the start of the disease between abnormal shrinkage and just shrinkage related to aging can be rather difficult to call. So there's a bit of a problem of specificity with the scan. And I have to say, this is a huge misconception in the community that I meet people over and over again who say that, who think that the diagnosis is made by a scan, that the MRI said that, I've got Alzheimer's, and the MRI can't say that. And then as time goes by, the brain will shrink and it will become more abnormal. But, at that early stage where someone's wondering, could I have the beginnings or something or not, the scan obviously, the scan will often sort of let you down. Mm. There are some diseases where, particularly in the family of frontotemporal dementias, where telltale patterns of focal shrinkage of the brain can actually be very useful for diagnosis with MRI. So that's MRI. Then there's another one which is looking at how the brain works, how brain function, and this is a thing called a PET scan, a fluorodeoxyglucose PET scan,
right?
Or FDG. FDG PET also used a lot in cancer to look for cancer spread.
I know it well because I've had ovarian cancer, so I'm well aware of it.
Right, yes. So you've had, yes. And so what that scan does is it's injecting radio tracer labelled glucose, and because the brain only runs on glucose as its energy source,
right.
If parts of the brain aren't working properly, that will show up on that scan as an area of reduced brain metabolism.
Oh, good. I'm pleased to hear that.
and to some degree, so it's, in other words, the opposite of how it's being used in oncology, where it's looking for increased metabolism to suggest that there might be a tumour.
Oh, right.
So that is, there are characteristic patterns to the different forms of dementia that one can see with that. But again, that it's measuring neurodegeneration, similar to the MRI, and because the neurodegeneration can be subtle in the early stages, it can be equivocal in, so it's not a very good test for someone who's just having very minor memory lapses, but on formal testing of their cognitive abilities, they're pretty normal.
Right.
It'll often not show up changes in that situation.
Right.
Again, there were sort of some of the atypical presentations of dementia can be very helpful, and in as the disease progresses, you expect to see changes emerge. So that's FDG PET. Then there's a third class of scan that's done, which is not covered by the health system at the moment, where, for instance, you image actual pathological changes. So in Alzheimer's disease, one of the things that happens in the brain is you get accumulation of this abnormal protein called amyloid, and you can actually give a tracer with the PET scanner that binds to the amyloid to show if someone's got amyloid in their brain or not.
Right.
And so if one was worried about Alzheimer's disease and had an amyloid scan that was negative, well, they don't have Alzheimer's.
Right.
So it can rule it out.
Okay.
Where it gets a bit tricky, though, is that amyloid starts to accumulate many years before any symptoms. So, one wouldn't be going out to the community just doing amyloid PET scans on 75-year-olds, because 25% of them would have a positive scan, and many
right.
of those would never live long enough to get any symptoms of dementia. So it's not all that useful in that regard, but very helpful in research.
I do every day, as my husband does. I do a Wordle puzzle, I do a crossword, I do a Sudoku. I haven't gone as far as learning another language or learning how to play the piano, but can we help by doing all these puzzles and things?
Probably not, actually.
Oh, what a waste! What a waste!
I feel like such a party pooper. The problem with those kinds of brain training things is that no one's ever been able to demonstrate any form of what's called transference. So in other words, if you're doing a particular puzzle, by doing it repeatedly, you'll get better at that puzzle.
Absolutely.
But it won't transfer onto making you better in other aspects of your life.
Right. Look, they're fun to do.
Yeah. And that's the key point, that they're fun to do. So if you enjoy doing them, then do it, because having a happy life is very important in all of this. And if doing puzzles makes you happy, then by all means do it. If, on the other hand, you find them tiresome, then don't do them. And this is very relevant, because this comes up in with our clinic population all the time, of when someone is actually developing a degenerative dementia, and then and their family is inflicting them with Sudokus and word searches and things, and that's not a good idea unless the person loves doing them in the first place.
Right.
Because all you're going to do is put that person under stress.
Frustrate them, Yeah,
exactly. And that's the one thing that you absolutely want to avoid if you're developing one of these diseases. You need to try and take active steps to be as happy as possible, which, and obviously for a lot of the time, we're dealt cards that mean that's harder to achieve than it's not like you can just go and choose these kind of things. People have tragedies in their lives and so on. But you don't want to voluntarily go out and doing things that you find are unpleasant if you're developing a dementia.
Right. But if you enjoy doing them, well, they're good for your overall well-being, I imagine.
For your enjoyment. They're good for your overall enjoyment.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we are running out of time, sadly. So I wanted to just ask you, how does the Brain Institute, Peter, get its funding? I mean, how can we help? The best way to perhaps contact Sally Ann Atkinson, as our listeners know, is a regular guest here, and she's on the Queensland Brain Institute, and I talked to her about that. But what is the best way for people to help the Brain Institute?
Biomedical research costs money, and the environment for that kind of thing is tough these days. And so anyone who would like to support the Brain Institute through philanthropy and charitable donations and fundraisers and stuff, they would be very, very, very welcome indeed.
And the web page to go on?
Yes, so QBI is the shorthand. But if you just type into a Google search Queensland Brain Institute, the website will come up. And
Terrific.
On the website, you'll see there'll be a drop down on how to support the institute. Or one can telephone the QBI as well.
I think you're having a function, aren't you, down at the Officers' Mess in New Farm? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, indeed. That's coming up in a couple of weeks' time, and tickets are still available.
Right.
So this is an afternoon or sort of early evening event in support of Alzheimer's research at the Queensland Brain Institute.
Terrific.
It's organised each year by a tremendous supporter of the institute called Robin Hilton, who lost her husband to Alzheimer's disease. And yes, it's typically a great evening with prizes and auctions and
terrific,
all sorts of fun activities. So
go along and have fun. But look, thank you, Professor Nestor, Peter Nestor, for being my guest. It's been terrific to have you on, and I don't know, will I continue with those wordles and Sudokus? But I enjoy them.
If you like them, then keep doing it.
Well, my husband and I do the crossword together, and that's all a bit of fun with a cup of coffee and a bit of dark chocolate or something like that. But look, it has been a pleasure to have you on board, and I do thank you for your time. Now, this program has been recorded in the studios of 4RPH Reading Radio in Brisbane for syndication around Australia, and will be available on my YouTube channel, Lots to Chat About with Rosemary Peterswald, where I'd be very grateful if you could please subscribe. Thank you, Paul, for producing, and thank you, Professor Peter Nestor from the Brain Institute of Queensland. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Been a pleasure.
Great friends and great chats. That was another Lots to Chat About with Rosemary Peterswald. Stay tuned next week for another amazing chat.